Comrades and friends, welcome to the program Global Weekly News, serial number 158. First item, Trump once again tightens the US blockades on Cuba. US President Donald Trump's June 30 executive order reinstated all the sanctions against Cuba that Joe Biden had lifted and implemented new measures against Cuban companies with alleged ties to Cuba's military. President Trump is committed to fostering a free and democratic Cuba, addressing the Cuban people's long-standing suffering under a communist regime, reads a White House fact sheet which accuses the Cuban government of harboring fugitives of American justice. Cuba has granted political asylum of black liberation activist Assata Shakur, who escaped the US prison system after facing what a UN Committee on Human Rights called cruel and unusual punishment. Mandalo de los Santos, Cuba Solidarity activist and executive director of the US People's Forum, in a post on X said, "This is not about freedom, it's about starvation as a weapon, a cruel attempt to force Cubans to surrender their independence." US sanctions and the economic blockade against Cuba have resulted in a humanitarian crisis on Cuba. Almost every single country on earth condemned the tightening blockade against Cuba. The government of Venezuela, another nation embattled by US sanctions, issued a letter in solidarity with Cuba, declaring the executive order an anachronistic, inhuman policy. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America issued a statement condemning the US blockades and said that the real objective of the US government is to take over Cuba and control its destiny. One of Trump's first acts upon entering the office for the second time was to re-add Cuba to the US State Department's list of state sponsors of terrorism. Only days after his predecessor Joe Biden had lifted the designation. Trump also recently revived one of his first-term policies, the travel ban, which includes a limitation on travel from Cuba. Long live Cuba, long live socialism, down with imperialism. Comrades all over the world, Cuba's Solidarity Fund is being collected. Please extend your contribution. Thank you. Second item, let us celebrate the life and legacy of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was born on 2nd July 1925, 100 years before, and murdered on 17th June 1961, 17th January 1961. On 2nd July, we celebrate the life and legacy of Patrice Lumumba, the Congolese revolutionary leader and spearhead of his country's independence. Born 100 years ago, Lumumba dedicated his life to the struggle for freedom, dignity and self-determination in the face of colonial domination. As the first Prime Minister of the newly independent Democratic Republic of the Congo, Lumumba stood unwavering in his commitment to African unity, national sovereignty and the liberation of the working people. A powerful orator and organizer, he led the Congolese national movement, uniting people across ethnic and regional lines in the fight against Belgian colonialism and imperialist interference. Despite his short time in power, Lumumba's vision for a free and just Congo inspired millions across Africa and the world. On 14th September 1960, Colonel Mobutu, backed by the CIA, Belgian intelligence and Western powers, staged a coup and arrested Lumumba. Lumumba was tortured for months at a stretch and summarily executed on 17th January 1961. At the age of 35, the man who led Congo's independence from Belgium was murdered with the support of Belgian and US powers. Let's salute to Comrade Patrice Lumumba. Let's salute, let's salute. Third item, comrades, protest against Togo's president. This is again Africa. Togo is a country in West Africa. Gnassingbé Bey Yedama seized power and became president in 1967 and remained president for 38 years until his death. His son, Faure Gnassingbé Bey, has ruled since 2005 as combined. The Gnassingbé family has governed Togo for 58 years, a fact that has fueled widespread frustration among ordinary citizens and civil society groups. National Assembly in 2024 April passed a new constitution that fundamentally restructures the country's political system. Under the reforms, a parliamentary system is established, replacing the direct popular vote for presidential elections. Second, the head of the government will now be the President of the Council of Ministers. Third, Council of Ministers, a newly created position wielding full executive, civil and military authority. That is, the new President of the Council of Ministers will have all powers. Third item, the President of Council of Ministers will be elected by the National Assembly rather than by the public. Fourth item, the President's term is set at 6 years and can be renewed indefinitely. Presidential terms are extended from 5 to 6 years and capped at a single term, but Gnassingbé Bey, nearly 2 decades already in office, without count towards this limit. In May 2025, Faure Gnassingbé Bey was formally sworn in as Togo's first president of the Council of Ministers, cementing his control over all levers of government. Since June 26, thousands of people of the Togo flooded the streets of Lomé, the capital, and other cities, demanding the resignation of President Faure Gnassingbé Bey and also protesting the high cost of living. These protests were met with heavy police repression, resulting in at least 7 reported deaths and numerous injuries. So we have seen how in Togo, for a single family governing the country for 58 years, such a stretch, I think nowhere this is a picture. Next item, Comrade Panama. It's a Central American country. 1st July marks 1 year since Jose Raul Mulino took office as President of Panama. Mulino got 34.23% of the valid votes on 5th May 2024. Mulino has promised an administration that would bring economic prosperity and social peace, social tranquility to Panama. However, he followed the new liberal policies besides aligning itself with US foreign policy, despite the long legacy of US intervention that weighs heavily on Panamanian history. These and other factors had provoked enormous resistance on the part of the organized workers through mobilizations and a national strike that has lasted several months. Health workers, teachers, unions, student organizations, agricultural workers, and more remain on indefinite strike in Panama. So far, they have been on strike for more than 60 days of protest, demos, road closings, etc. There is mass rejection of the proposal to reopen the country's largest copper mine, which was closed following major protests in 2023. But the issue that has provoked the greatest animosity is the approval of Law 462, a pension system reform which reduces the pension and opens the door for privatizing social security. Comrades, from Panama we go to now July 5 and July 4. Two different worlds and two different freedom days. Celebrations different. Venezuela and America. July 5, July 4. Freedom Day celebrations in Venezuela and USA. South American country Venezuela was a colony of Spain. Venezuela, along with Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, got liberated by struggles led by Simon Bolivar. The entire region of Latin America and the Caribbean erupted into revolutionary movements more than 2 centuries ago as a response to some of the worst atrocities in human history: colonization, slavery, forced conversions to Catholicism, cultural erasure, and resource extraction. Venezuela lost half of its population. Speaking before the Venezuela Congress in 1819, Simon Bolivar declared, "The most perfect system of the government is that which produces the greatest possible amount of happiness, social security, and political stability." Venezuela became free from Spain, but not from exploitation. After the discovery of oil beginning in the 1920s, the country became a new kind of colony, one shaped by foreign corporations and US geopolitical interests. While oil profits filled pockets of MNCs and domestic elites, the majority of Venezuelans lived in poverty with no access to healthcare, education or housing. That began to change in 1998 when Hugo Chavez, invoking the legacy of Bolivar, won the presidency and launched what became known as the Bolivarian Revolution. It was transformative, and it was deeply threatening the powers that had always treated Venezuela as a resource, not a republic. From the moment Hugo Chavez took office in 1999 and began redirecting Venezuela's oil wealth towards social programs, land reform and regional integration, the backlash began. Chavez refused to implement neoliberalism dictated by United States. In 2002, the US has backed a coup attempt against Chavez while briefly removed him from power before a massive popular uprising brought him back. But the attacks did not stop. Economic sabotage, disinformation campaigns, and diplomatic isolation escalated over the years. After Chavez's death in 2013, under Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela was hit with the full spectrum of economic warfare. Hundreds of unilateral coercive measures, the freezing of billions in international assets, restrictions on food and medicines input, and open support for regime change, a war without bombs. In the United States, it is easy to treat independence as something that was achieved once and for all in 1776. But why is US still trying to control the fate of others? Why do US claim to stand for freedom while undermining it abroad through sanctions, coups, and endless wars? And why are so many people in the US still struggling just to survive? While the US government spends trillions of dollars on foreign wars and military bases, US people are told there is not enough for universal health care, housing or public education. The same officials who lecture the world about freedom are the ones lining up to vote for the Big Beautiful Bill, a package that delivers massive tax breaks to billionaires while dismantling the programs that keep people housed, fed and alive. US is attempting to deport 2 to 3 crore immigrants. Unhoused people are criminalized and Palestinian solidarity is silenced. Life expectancy in US drops and student debt skyrockets. Sixth item, comrades, we go to Europe. Civil disobedience spreads across Serbia. Acts of civil disobedience are ongoing in Serbia following another large-scale protest held on 28th June calling for snap elections and the restoration of democratic institutions. The demonstration, which brought at least 140,000 people to the center of Belgrade, was once again led by the student movement. Serbia is facing a social and political crisis which can be solved through fair elections only. Alongside the institutional reform, protesters have highlighted the urgent need to address widespread poverty, economic inequality, and faltering labor rights. Public anger is growing against the controversial lithium mining project led by the MNC company Rio Tinto, the launch of major construction projects benefiting foreign capital. Dozens of students were detained. Student groups have called trade unions to launch a general strike to back the protest demands. Comrades and friends, seventh item. Now we go to our neighboring country, Pakistan. Pakistan calls for India's compliance with the Indus Water Treaty. Indus Water Treaty, IWT, was signed in 1960 to share the water of the Indus and the 5 tributaries between India and Pakistan. Under the treaty, India has a right to use water from the southern tributaries, Ravi, Bias and Satluj, while Pakistan has a right to northern Indus, Jhelum and Chenab rivers. It was signed under the mediation of the World Bank. Following the attacks in Pahalgam, inside Jammu Kashmir on 22nd April, in which 26 civilians, mostly tourists, were killed, India accused Pakistan of being behind the attacks. India announced it was putting the IWT, Indus Water Treaty, in abeyance for an indefinite period until Pakistan stops its alleged support for anti-India terrorist groups. On 27th June, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Netherlands Hague, affirmed that it still has jurisdiction over the Indus Water Treaty and no party can unilaterally suspend participation in it. Following this, Pakistan called on India to immediately return to full compliance with the treaty. An ongoing arbitration process under the Indus Water Treaty was initiated by Pakistan in 2016 over its objections to India's 2 hydroelectric projects in Kishanganga and Ratil in Jammu Kashmir. India's external ministry claimed that India has never recognized the existence in law of the so-called Court of Arbitration. Diplomatic engagement between India and Pakistan has been suspended by India for years now. Pakistan reiterated its offer for restarting political engagements with India to resolve all the existing issues, including the Indus Water Treaty, as well as resuming normal relations between both the countries. Eighth item, comrades. 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. US President Donald Trump announced on his Truth Social platform, what Israel accepted the necessary conditions to reach a 60-day ceasefire agreement with Hamas, which would eventually lead to the end of the war on Gaza. Qatar and Egypt are the main mediators. As per media reports, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to travel to Washington, D.C. on 7th July to discuss key regional issues with the US President, including the Gaza ceasefire proposal, the conflict with Iran, and developments related to Syria. Current proposal stipulates releasing 10 of the remaining living Israeli captives and the bodies of 18 dead bodies of captives held in Gaza in exchange for a number of Palestinian prisoners over a 60-day period. Hamas issued a statement on 2nd July, confirmed that it is studying the US proposal. Hamas maintained that the agreement should guarantee ending Israel's aggression, the withdrawal of its forces, and the immediate delivery of aid to the besieged Gaza Strip. Lastly, comrades, second annual People's Conference for Palestine. In May 2024, 3,000 pro-Palestine activists met in Detroit of USA for a 3-day conference. Activists discussed the highlights of the growing movement for Palestine, which had seen skyrocketing mass participation since October 2023. These highlights included the historic national marches in Washington against genocide, university workers in California going on strike for the right of these students to protest. The conference also marked the official launch of the Palestinian Youth Movement campaign, Mosque of Mosque, aiming to shed light on the enormous role played by Danish shipping giant Maersk in transporting weapons to Israel as it carries out genocide in Gaza. For the second year in a row, Palestinian diaspora and solidarity activists are set to convene in Detroit, Michigan, for the second edition of the People's Conference for Palestine. This People's Conference for Palestine will discuss some of the key issues and building the next phases of the campaign and the arms embargo movement. Thank you, comrades. Last salam. See you next week.